All right, y'all, welcome back. We're doing our Genesis study. This is day 2, lesson 3. We're going to go straight into it. All right, like I said, we're on day 2 where God creates the firmament. Starting in verse 6. God said, "Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so. And God called the expanse heaven. And there was evening and there was morning the second day." So let's go over the first part here. God said, "Let there be an expanse in the midst of the water." So this word expanse, this is the ESV. Some other translations say firmament, right? This is where we get that term firmament. It's really the only place in the Bible it's used, or only thing it's referred to is what we would call the atmosphere, I guess, or some would say differently, which I think we're probably in the middle of that. So what is the expanse or firmament? It's the Hebrew word is rakia, and it means it's an expanse or a firmament, or like an apparent visible arch in the sky. And so firmament is a proper translation as well as expanse, but it does speak to something that is physical, not just something, maybe an atmosphere doesn't quite describe what this is. Maybe they are onto something, the flat earthers, that are onto this idea that there is a solid dome above us. It may not be solid in the way that they think, but it's not necessarily immaterial either. This root word for rakia is rakah, and it means to beat out, to make broad, to spread abroad. And it has this analogy of hammering out the sky. And this is kind of what we see how God describes how he did create the heavens. Here in Job 9, it says, "Who alone stretched out the heavens and trampled the waves of the sea?" Right? God's stretching out the heavens. This stretching out the heavens is referred all throughout the Old Testament. Here's just a few of them. More than a few, but this is but there's even more than this. So you have this idea of this firmament, this expanse. It does seem to have some sort of material to it. Granted, if we can go further, we can maybe get a little bit better understanding of what the firmament actually is. And so the question is it solid? Right? So I know I've seen a lot of videos where the flatter, they'll show how a rocket goes in the sky and hits the firmament and blows up or something. At least that's what they'll say that's happened. And they'll definitely question that we've been to outer space and whatnot like that. So I do think they're onto something. I do think there's a little more material to it, but I do believe we've been able to go through the firmament. I don't think it's something that's holding us here to Earth. So is the firmament solid? Yes and no. I'd say yes and no. Here's Job 37. It says, "Can you with him spread out the sky, which is as strong as a cast metal mirror?" I was talking to somebody and I was explaining that there is a lot of analogies and metaphors in Scripture, but God doesn't lie to tell the truth. He can use analogies and metaphors that may not be 100% word for word the same thing, or it means exactly what it's saying, but it's not untrue, is how I would like to say it. I don't think God uses untrue things to describe truth. So when he's saying, which is as strong as a cast metal mirror, I think there is something to that. I do think it's the firmament is strong. Here in Ezekiel, it's talking about this vision he sees. It says, "Over the head of the living creature, there was the likeness of an expanse, like an awesome crystal to look at, stretched out over their heads above." So here's this picture of this gem here. And it's, when I was reading this, that's what it reminded me of. This gem. We see through it? Yes. Is it solid? Yes. Is it something blocking us from leaving Earth and going into that realm of the stars and the moon? And no, I don't think it's holding us back. And I'll explain that here as we get to the end. But let's go to verse 7. "And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so." So what are the waters here? Mayim is the word here, the Hebrew word, and it does mean waters, but it's a plural sense used as singular. So there's something to it here, a little bit more of it's waters meaning that, but kind of like sheep for in the English language, where you can be referring to a sheep as one, but it's a plural word as well. And so we can see there are actually 4 states of matter. We'll use water as an understanding. So you can see when water is a solid, the molecules are all close together. As it gets warmer, they are not bound together. They become loose, and you have here you have the liquid. And if it gets hotter than that, they spread out even more and still not bound. And so you get steam or gas. And then if it gets even hotter, you get this plasma type material. Now, plasma is similar to steam, where, yeah, we can run our hands through it. But even more so, because now they're not even, these molecules and these ions, electrons aren't even connected, but they are still all there. And so you have this plasma up in this atmosphere, up in our atmosphere. And I think this is a good image of what you can see, right? This is the northern lights. And so what's happening is sun is reflecting off of this plasma that's in our atmosphere, and it's giving it some color. We see color reflected onto these things that we normally wouldn't see. That this firmament that I believe would be clear, that I believe is the firmament, would be clear. But you can see there is something to it there. Even when we have the northern lights here, the sun shines and reflects those colors. Let's go to the last verse. And God called the expanse heaven, and there was evening and there was morning the second day. So we have 3 levels of heaven. I think it's fair to say that. Now, some might have some other ideas, but I think this is sometimes Scripture we'll talk about the heavens, and you really got to understand the context of which heaven they're talking about. But the first heaven is the sky above, right? That's where we see the clouds or the birds flying in the air. Here's Genesis 6. I will blot out man whom I have created from the face of the land, man and animals and creeping things, and birds of the heavens, for I am sorry that I have made them. So birds of the heavens, this is talking about the air up there that man is not usually privy to, are able to get access easily, but we are today, obviously, with flight and all those kind of things. But that would be inside our atmosphere. That would be inside the firmament, maybe. Or maybe the firmament is wider than we thought. But then there's outer space. This is another type of level of heaven. Here's Deuteronomy 4. It says, take heed lest you lift up your eyes to heaven, and when you see the sun, the moon, and the stars, all the host of heaven, you feel driven to worship them and serve them. So here we see outer space reference. God even talks about, he puts stars in the firmament, right? And what we'll see in day 4, I believe. And so we'll see that there's the firmament even covers some of the outer space, is what we would call it. And then lastly, heaven, meaning God's abode. This is where God dwells, right? Hebrews 9:24. For Christ has not entered the holy places made with hands, which are copies of the true, but into heaven in itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. So here we see another heaven that we would not have access to. So I'm going to get a little off topic. Not necessarily, I'll bring it back here so that we can understand and really get a really encouraging, positive application from this as well. But a question, how many dimensions are there, right? This is something that's debated. We don't 100% know, but we do know that we experience 4 of them. We have length, width, height, and we experience time as another dimension. But there are theories and scientific studies that show that we maybe have 10 or even 12. Chuck Missler, who's a guy I listen to, he has passed now, unfortunately. He is with the Lord, but he has a lot of great information. But he talks about how there was an Hebrew scholar who he was doing a study on Genesis, and just off a study on Genesis, he came up with the theory, or the idea that there are 10 dimensions, and sure enough, modern physics with the string theory proposes there are a 10-dimensional universe as well, 4 which we are experience and 6 that are outside of our experience. So understand there are other dimensions. There are more dimensions than we can experience. And so let me give you an example of it. So here is a triangle, right? This is the common equation for a triangle. A squared plus b squared equals c squared, right? And so when you have a triangle with a right angle, you have or when you have a triangle, you measure all three sides and you'll be able to, they equal up to 180, right? So here's an example too. You have 60 degrees and two corners. That means your third corner is going to be 60 degrees. If you have a 90-degree corner and a 30-degree corner, that means that other corner will be 60 degrees. This is something that is always true. If it's a triangle, it will have 180 degrees, sum of all the interior angles. Now, that means this should not be allowed. We cannot have three 90-degree angles. However, when you take that 2D triangle and put it into a 3D plane, you can actually have a triangle with three 90 degrees. And so a two-dimensional object, now it's encountered something and experienced something outside of its dimension. Now the natural laws and the things they normally expect are broken. They don't fit the same standard. So you have this triangle where we say always has to equal 180, but if you put that triangle on a globe like you see here in a picture, you are able to have three 90-degree angles. And so because you're outside of this dimension, because there's an extra dimension involved now, the natural laws don't work. All right, so keep that in mind, and we're going to I hope that explains. There are other dimensions, and I think that's even partially what has happened here with this creating of this firmament. What you have is these creations of these dimensions. You almost have it seeming like God's stretching out space, right? And when he says the waters between the waters, we can see water is everywhere. Water's beneath us, water's in us, water's around us, water's in the atmosphere. Water seems to be everywhere but outer space, maybe. At least that they haven't found yet. So here, another thing, keep that in mind, though. Keep this idea of what's going on here in the firmament and how possibly these dimensions here. And I don't know if you noticed, but on the second day, God did not say it was good. It says that it was so. Let's go back to the verse here. In verse 7. It said, God made the expanse, separated the waters that were under the expanse from waters that were above the expanse, and it was so. And then God called the expanse heaven, and there was an evening and morning, second day. So we don't have this "it was good" saying here. So why didn't God say it was good? Here we go. We say it. Why did God just say it was so? All right, Chuck Missler has this good illustration here. You have Mr. and Mrs. Flat. That's what he calls them. And so they're 2D figures, right? They're in a two-dimensional space. I'm in a three-dimensional space. And so what's happened here is that because of these, because I'm in a different dimension than they are, when they spread apart, I am able to be just as close to both of them, even though they have spread apart. So when they're together, maybe they can feel that I'm really, really close to them. But when they are spread apart, how can I still be the same distance to both of them? Because I'm in another dimension. So why didn't God say it was good? I think he didn't. He said it was. He did not say it was good. I think there's two reasons. One, I think we saw that there was no creation. It's a separating of waters, and God, this idea of separation isn't necessarily something God sees as good. And also that ties into the idea that there is creating this dimension, which God knew at one point would create this separation from us and God. I don't know why he didn't say it. In fact, in the Septuagint, it does say it was good. I believe the Hebrew version is more accurate for several reasons, but this idea that you're separating these waters from these waters, you're creating space in different dimensions. Now, before the fall, we likely would have been able to experience all of those. You know, Adam walked in the garden with God, but God knew the fall would come. And I wonder if this is why he didn't say it was good, because he knew this separation would be something that actually separates us from him in the future. And so this is where we get Psalm 34. This is where we can get hopefully some encouragement. When the righteous cry for help, the Lord hears and delivers them out of all their troubles. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. Just like with Mr. and Mrs. Flat, though it seems like God can't be near us, He is. All we got to do is cry out to Him. He's created this expanse here, this separation from earth and the heavens. And now because of the fall, God's not with us in the way He was before the garden, right? And so this isn't a good thing. This is something that unfortunately was going to lead to a separation from God, and this idea that we don't get to experience the fullness of God, just like Mr. and Mrs. Flat don't get to experience me. And so when their life goes about and they're away from this area and maybe they spread apart, or they don't understand how I can be close to both of them, regardless of where they are in their dimension. They can't understand it because I'm on another dimension. The same thing is true for us and God. No matter what we're going through, God can be near us. God can be with us wherever we go, right? When the righteous cry for help, the Lord hears and delivers them out of all their troubles. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. Do you believe that? Do you believe that? I think if you did, me too, if we believed it like we should, our anxiety would be much lower. Our faith would be much greater if we believed and understood that God loves us. He's near us. And though we don't see it and we're not experiencing it like like we will one day, we can still know it's true today, even though we're not able to experience it. So do you believe it? Trust in the Lord. When you call to Him, He is near, and that's a guarantee. All right, I'll see y'all next time.